Hey, this is Kevin. This is the weekly science review for March 5th, 2017. This week we have 8 different stories I want to cover. Several are in the biotech industry, and then the rest are going to be in space exploration. My first story is one I found in Next Big Future. It's titled, Gene Therapy Cures Sickle Cell in Teenage Boy. According to the article, the doctors removed his bone marrow, which is the part of your body that makes the blood. Then they genetically altered it in a lab to compensate for the defect in his DNA, which causes his sickle cell anemia. The altered bone marrow was then placed back into his body, and it started producing healthy red blood cells. And according to the article, he has been in remission for 15 months. They're not calling this a cure necessarily, but they are saying he is in full remission. My next article is also from the Next Big Future. This one is titled, Bioprinter Makes Fully Functional Human Skin. Researchers in Spain have developed a 3D bioprinter prototype that can print totally functional human skin. The skin is adequate for transplanting to patients or for use in research or in testing of cosmetics, chemicals, and pharmaceutical products. This reminds me an awful lot of the stem cell gun that was talked about in a National Geographic special about 5 years ago. Here's a small bit from that National Geographic special.
Basically what they were doing was taking my stem cells from my skin and putting them all in the gun and spraying it on my arm.
Scientists have been able to regenerate sheets of skin for decades. The problem is it takes weeks for that skin to grow, and the new skin is extremely fragile. Gerlach's gun solves both of these problems.
It takes like 1.5 hours to take the biopsy, to isolate the cells, and to spray the cells.
This is what Yoram's skin probably looked like before treatment. This is what it looked like 4 days after it was sprayed with his own stem cells.
Given where we've come in the past 5 years, I would not be surprised that in the next decade we will see the ability to regrow just about any organ in the body. You lose an arm in an accident, they'll regrow your arm. You have a heart attack and your heart is damaged, they'll regrow you a new one. You get lung cancer, and instead of removing pieces of your lung and trying to do a lung transplant with somebody else, they'll just simply regrow your lung. Number 3 is from Reuters, and it is Trump asks NASA to explore putting crew on rocket's debut flight. In a nutshell, NASA is expected to test its heavy lift Space Launch System rocket and Orion deep space capsule in 2018. Well, the Trump administration is directing NASA to study whether or not it's feasible to fly astronauts on that debut flight. Now, while I don't think this is a bad idea per se, I do believe there is a different approach we should be taking, and that will be a great segue to the next article. SpaceX was approached by 2 private citizens about flying a round-the-moon trip. This would be a perfect test of SpaceX's Dragon capsule, and most likely will beat NASA in their SLS Orion capsule test that they planned for 2018. Number 5 is also from the Next Big Future, and it's an article titled, Bigelow Aerospace Offers Plan for Expandable Space Station Orbiting the Moon by 2020. Bigelow Aerospace would like to place one of their B330 modules in a low lunar orbit. The B330 is actually quite big, with 12,000 cubic square feet of internal space. Just one B330 module has about a third the area of the International Space Station. Additionally, the B330 can dock with a variety of spacecraft, from the Russian Soyuz spacecraft to SpaceX's Dragon 2, Boeing's STS-100 Starliner, NASA's Orion spacecraft, and most likely even Chinese craft. Now on to number 6. This article comes from Scientific American, and it is titled, How to Get Back to the Moon in 4 Years, This Time to Stay. Now, if you've noticed, there's been a theme to this little journey here. I've taken you from the SLS and Orion capsule, then to the SpaceX Dragon 2 capsule, then to the Bigelow Aerospace BA330. Now, this theme that you might have noticed is leading us to this Scientific American article. Now, this article is written by Howard Bloom. He is founder and chair of the Space Development Steering Committee. He is one of the Board of Governors for the National Space Society, and he's currently co-conceiving a multiplanetary project for Caltech's Keck Institute for Space Studies. In other words, The guy knows what he's talking about. Now, if you recall from earlier, I referenced an article about President Trump wishing to put a crew on the Orion space capsule's debut flight. Now, Howard Bloom argues that that is a waste of effort. He argues that it's a waste because the Space Launch System and Orion capsule are too expensive and won't be completed for years, but that SpaceX and Bigelow Aerospace have already developed the means to land on the moon. So given that, the smart decision would be to cancel the Space Launch System and the Orion capsule, then divert that money into purchasing the capabilities from Bigelow Aerospace and SpaceX. I believe Howard Bloom is absolutely correct. This is the quickest way to get us back to the moon, and it is the only way that's going to get us back there to stay. But in addition to that, it will also help us get to Mars much faster. Now, continuing this space theme, number 7 is America needs a U.S. Space Corps. In this particular article, retired Air Force Colonel M.V. Coyote Smith proposes that the United States make a space command. This space command would exist alongside the Air Force much the same way the Navy and the Marines exist side by side. I am totally behind this idea for many reasons. The biggest reason, in my opinion, is that the United States, nor any other nation for that matter, has a search and rescue program for Earth orbit and beyond. Consequently, if something terrible happens at the space station, there's nobody there to rescue anybody. No rescue would ever happen. Or, say, for instance, a satellite were damaged for one reason or another, and it was spinning out of control, and they could tell that it was going to hit something else. We have no means to remove that particular satellite out of orbit before it does more damage. The world needs that capability, and the United States has served that role through the U.S. Navy for our oceans, and I think the United States would be well suited to serve that role in Earth orbit. And honestly, I think the right craft for this Space Corps has already been proposed. It was proposed by NASA about 5 years ago, and it's called the Nautilus. Check out this video here. This particular spacecraft uses a combination of Bigelow Aerospace modules plus technology that was also developed for the International Space Station. The only bit of technology in this that would have to be developed from scratch is this artificial gravity centrifuge. Bigelow has had 2 of these inflatable modules in orbit since 2008, and both are still working as advertised. As first proposed, the Nautilus-X would use a Vassimer propulsion system, but the modular design will allow upgrades to any type of propulsion system that is developed. As you can see, most of the scaffolding and robotic arm are what you would find on the International Space Station. And considering that the docking port is compatible with the International Space Station and the Orion capsule, that also means that it's compatible with a Russian capsule, the SpaceX capsule, the Boeing capsule, and the Bigelow Habitat docking port. The modular design would allow commanders to configure the Nautilus-X for a variety of missions, from those around Earth to extended duration missions out to the outer planets. Although it wasn't originally proposed, this particular craft could do search and rescue. It could do salvage and recovery operations. It could also do combat operations. I could see it going longer and with more engines. On top are docking ports for landing craft. And of course, there could be multiple configurations for docking ports. And as well, there is absolutely no technical reason why you would absolutely, positively have to have that ring either. That's just for the convenience of the crew, of having, an artificial gravity. Compared to previous NASA spacecraft, the Nautilus-X is a rather inexpensive ship. The base model, which is a command module on the front, a ring module, plus 1 row of inflatable modules with no propulsion system, was estimated in 2011 to come in at about $6 billion. This craft would be ideal for going to Mars, exploring the asteroid belt, and visiting the outer planets. I think this would serve as an excellent inaugural ship for a United States Space Corps. I've presented the stories that I've presented today in order to show that humanity is closer to that space age that was envisioned 40 years ago. Additionally, if we follow the advice of Howard Bloom, we could achieve that goal that Elon Musk wants of having humanity on Mars by 2030. All right. Now, thanks for watching. This is Kevin's Weekly Science Review, week ending March 5th, 2017.